Welcome to another episode of Inflection. My name is Brian Berletic. Joining me as always is Angelo Giuliano. Hello, Angelo. How are you?
Hi, Brian. Always a pleasure.
Great. And we've got a lot to talk about. Usually we have a couple of news items, but I think we're just going to focus on this first one. And then after that, we're going to start talking about infrastructure in China, which is also a huge topic. So let's just go right into this news story. People have been speaking up about this for a long time, but the West is still at it. They don't care. So this is the latest smear piece by the Western media about Xinjiang, China, regarding, they're calling it a genocide against the Uyghur population. And look at the headline alone. You already know they're trying to mislead you. Room for 10,000 inside China's largest detention center. Room for 10,000, not filled with 10,000 people, just room for 10,000. And they will actually admit, and we'll see in this article, they will admit that it's not even half full. It's not even half full. But I want to show you just how dishonest AP is and how easy it is to debunk Associated Press and other liars like this. And that's what they are. They're deliberate liars. They're depicting a scene in the what they call a prison or detention center, and it could be this is what every prison is like. So there's nothing unique about this first paragraph. But then they say this is one of the estimated 240 cells in just one section of this detention center. They said the detention center is the largest in the country and possibly the world, with a complex that sprawls over 220 acres, making it twice as large as Vatican City. Like, what is the Vatican City the second largest prison in the world? That's why they're comparing it to this one. And if you go to Google and you just do a real quick search, largest prison in the world, Rikers Island, New York City. Here's a BBC article about Rikers Island, 2019. It's 413 acres, almost twice as big as this detention facility in Xinjiang. And they're saying there's 7,000 inmates, and it peaked at 20,000 inmates in the 1990s. So much larger inmate population and just physically larger, twice as large as this one that AP is talking about. So already, not even past the introduction of this article, they're completely lying about everything. And one more thing, before we start getting into the actual story here. China has described its sweeping lockup of 1 million or more minorities over the past 4 years as a war against terror. Actually, China never said that it's locking up 1 million people. This is AP mixing this sentence up. China's saying they're locking people up because there's a terrorist problem, which is absolutely true. And I'm going to show you how even AP admits that. But then they're throwing this in as if China has admitted to that. They have not said that. And they're saying after a series of knifings and bombings by a small number of extremist Uyghurs. So they're trying to act like it was just a little scuffle and then China overreacted. And I want to show people this AP article. Let's reload it here. AP exclusive, Uyghurs fighting in Syria take aim at China. This was published in 2017, so we're going to see how it was a totally different story. And then after I show people just how badly they're lying, I want you to jump in here and tell me what you think, Angelo. Uyghur militants have killed hundreds, if not thousands, in attacks inside China in a decades-long insurgency that initially targeted police and other symbols of Chinese authority, but in recent years also included civilians. Extremists with knives killed 33 people at a train station in 2014. Abroad, they bombed the Chinese embassy in Kyrgyzstan in September last year. In 2014, they killed 25 people in an attack on a Thai shrine, popular Chinese tourists. And actually, this was 2015, so AP can't even get the year right. And here's actually the AP story about that bombing, and you can see the year is 2015. So AP can't get basic facts right. Plus, they're just outright lying. Angelo, what do you think about this smear piece, this nonsense from AP that they themselves discredit with their own reporting from years ago?
I think it's just ridiculous. Just take a look at facts and figures. the US incarcerated population is the largest in the world. If you look at per capita, the US has 4 to 5 times the prison population of China. So that's a fact. And I mean, you see the way prison is treated in the US and China is very different. If you have money in the US, you get out. You get out because you pay the bail and you get out. So it's a system for the rich. You know, white collar don't go to prison. If you are white collar in China and you are convicted of corruption, well, you know, you go to jail. That's for sure. In the US, you know, well, tell me an example of politicians that go to jail. You know, they don't. If you got the money, you don't go to jail. Now, when it comes to terrorism, China has a model. It's quite unique. Actually, most of Muslim countries are trying to copy China on its model to de-radicalization. You know, and it's so much more human than what it was done in the US. I mean, the US, the war on terror killed millions of people. You know, it was about bombing people. And when it came to arresting people inside the US, it was about detention and for years and years without trials. And they legalized torture. And this is a country that actually wants to lecture China on human rights. And while it should be the opposite, they should learn about China and actually the prison system is not about punishing. It's more about how can we reintegrate people into society. While in the US, well, after if you go 1-2 times in jail for stealing, for petty crimes, well, you might end up not going out from jail, and you get it, and people that get out from jail, they get worse than before they were on the first place. So it's just the usual hypocrisy, Brian.
Yes, and as you were saying, the total prison population in the U.S. is around 2.2, 2.3 million. In China, who has a population over 4 times larger than the U.S., the prison population is 1.7 million. So even if you added a million Uighurs, a million Uighurs that they keep claiming, it would put them at just about even, and their incarceration rate would still be drastically lower than the U.S. And I want to show people this part here. In that 2017 AP article, Uyghur activists and Syrian and Chinese officials estimate that at least 5,000 Uyghurs have gone to Syria to fight. And I want to show you this article here. You gotta wait for it to load up. This is from Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, which is a US State Department funded media platform. And they have a map breaking down where these foreign fighters were coming from. And you're going to see, like, from Saudi Arabia, it's 2,000, 2,500. From Russia, from the Chechen region, 2,700. From France, 1,600. Pakistan, 400 to 500. Afghanistan, 50. From China, just from that AP article, 5,000 Uyghurs. So to say that China had a very real terrorism problem in Xinjiang is an understatement. It was huge. And we saw 5,000 extremists go as far as going to Syria to join Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And if you look at the extremism spectrum, the people willing to go that far to join ISIS and Al-Qaeda, that is at the far end of the extremist spectrum. There's plenty that stayed behind in China who are more than willing to carry out violence. So this is what China was dealing with. That's why they were putting people in prison. And I did the numbers and I figured out that just for Xinjiang to have the same incarceration rate as the United States is normal incarceration rate, they would have to have 175,000 Uyghurs locked up. And they would have to have 17 to 18 facilities like the one AP said was the largest in the world. They would have to have 17 to 18 of those facilities at full capacity to reach that number. And there is no evidence that they've done that. There's no evidence that they did. And even if they did, it would mean their incarceration rate was the same as the normal incarceration rate in the US. And as we see, even Associated Press admits, there was this horrible terrorist problem in Xinjiang. Actually, one more thing, Angelo, you might or might not have seen this because this is kind of an older article. It's from the LA Times. And this is about in China, rise of Salafism fosters suspicion and division among Muslims. Now, Salafism is not something indigenous to the Muslim communities in China. This is exported from Saudi Arabia. It is the politicalization of Islam, the weaponization of Islam, the perversion of Islam. And if we come down here, let me see if I can find it. It's a long article, but I suggest people read through it. It says, Saudi preachers and organizations began traveling to China. Some of them bore gifts, training programs for clerics, Qurans for distribution, funding for new Islamic institutes and mosques. And this was all to change the peaceful version of Islam that existed there, side by side with the Chinese for years and years, and to pervert it, to radicalize it, and to drive separatism funded by the US. And here's a Washington Post article. This is from 2018. Saudi prince denies Kirchner's in his pocket. The headline is irrelevant. The most important part is down at the bottom here. Right here. Asked about the Saudi-funded spread of Wahhabism, which is the same thing that they were just talking about, the austere faith that is dominant in the kingdom and that some have accused of being a source of global terrorism, Mohammed said that investments in mosques and madrasas overseas were rooted in the Cold War, when allies, the United States, asked Saudi Arabia to use its resources to prevent inroads in Muslim countries by the Soviet Union. And they're using the exact same strategy against China in Xinjiang by radicalizing Uyghur communities there. What do you think about that, Angelo? Have you seen that before?
Well, it's nothing new. This financing of madrasas, we saw it. It's still going on in places like Pakistan, but now people are aware. In China, it did learn from what happened in other countries like Syria and Libya, so it was very well prepared. And remember, there was this video of Alptekin, the founder of the World Uyghur Congress. He was saying calling the jihad for mujahideens to come from all Central Asia and to flock into Xinjiang just to create a new Khalifa or something similar. But the main purpose was to get their hands on the oil and gas and to disrupt the Belt and Road Initiative and to disrupt China. So again, it's about looking at the ulterior motives here. But people are learning, and I think China is actually showing the way to Muslim countries on how they could deal with extremism. How do you do that? You build roads and you bring education and you bring basic human rights. I mean, food. I mean, once people you get them busy with a job, and you give them opportunities, they're not going into radicalism. The root of the radicalization is actually prosperity. When you have an isolated village where you have no future, well, it's very easy for them just to buy into those radical ideas. So China was very smart. The root of the problem was education and access to opportunities. And that's what China is doing to Xinjiang. So it's very much bothering the West that China is actually building roads in Xinjiang, because again, remember what Chinese say, if you want to become rich, start building a road. That's basics.
Absolutely, that's a good point. And I remember, because you were talking about the Khan of Kalat, the last episode, this proxy puppet that the US wanted to use to rule over Baluchistan once they carved that off from Pakistan. It was just like a mini Xinjiang scheme that they were running in Pakistan. And that guy was at the House of Lords in the UK, and someone was even asking, we have to hurry up because if China's project gets finished and they bring in all of this prosperity, we're not going to be able to, keep the separatism going. We have to hurry up. Aren't you telling the US and India that we need to hurry up with this? Because they know that development, peace and prosperity and stability drains the swamp of separatism that the US is trying to use as a weapon, not just against China, but against Pakistan. They were doing it in Syria. They did it in Libya. This is what they do everywhere. And I just found that LA Times article. I'm going to put it back up on the screen here for a moment, and I'm going to put the link in the video description below. In China, rise of Salafism fosters suspicion and division among Muslims. And they even say that as Saudi Arabia began exporting this perversion of Islam into Xinjiang, the Muslim communities in Xinjiang rejected it. And there was like this division within the Muslim communities because this radicalization that Saudi Arabia exports, these people are brainwashed and they're crazy. These are the people that end up in Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And you can't talk to them. You can't have a discussion with them. It's just like what they're doing in the US with the identity politics. People just become so detached from reality and the ability to beat people in the middle. And this is what they were doing in China deliberately. And one last thing on this topic before we move to the main discussion, or maybe a news item you want to go over, Angelo. This is more than just a smear campaign. This is what they were doing in Syria and Libya in the lead up to the 2011 engineered Arab Spring. They know that they've got these extremists that they're backing inside these countries, causing a huge national security threat. They depict the governments as brutal dictatorships or as police states, when in reality, they're just taking measures to stop this terrorism from destroying the country. And they try to impede the country from dealing with these security threats so that when the time comes to go all in on backing these armed insurgent groups, the government is unprepared and ill-equipped to do it. And we saw in Libya, the country got destroyed. We see in Syria, it's clinging to existence, fighting against this sort of terrorism, with literal Uighurs from Xinjiang helping fuel that fire. And this is exactly what this propaganda is meant to do to Xinjiang. It's meant to inhibit Beijing from dealing with this problem effectively so that they could keep this option open to eventually destroy the region and perhaps destroy China. Do you have anything else on this, Angelo, before we move on?
Well, I think it's very sad. How ironic is that the real enemies of those Muslims or those radicals are actually the ones that are funding them. If you think about it, how many times you have like protesters going into the streets? We saw it in Hong Kong. We saw it in many places. And you realize that the real enemies of those protesters are the ones that are actually funding them. It's very counterintuitive, but it's just, and they just end up being the useful idiots, just really useful idiots manipulated. And the problem is that what they have in common is low level of education. They are misled emotionally. If they were on the rational level, you could not be misled because you learn about history and you're not going to repeat mistakes of the past. And it's just you can mislead them just because of the ignorance. It's a shame. It's a shame.
And just think about what would an independent Baluchistan or an independent Xinjiang, what would that look like as a country? It would look like Libya. It would be this divided, infighting, violent, destabilized region. It would never become a functional nation state. It would be taken advantage by everyone around them because they're too small to defend themselves. So the separatists themselves do not benefit from the US doing this. It's a very cynical ploy to divide and conquer, which is what empire is all about, which is what the US is still pushing. Now, Angelo, you suggested a couple of other news stories. Was there anything else that you wanted to cover in terms of news?
We can jump into infrastructure because I think it's a very interesting subject.
Okay, so let's go to this one first. We talked about this before, but let's just have a conversation about the high-speed rail network in China in general. So this is China launches first fully electrified bullet train in Tibet. So I was studying a map. I was watching where this and other lines were running through, and so this is very difficult terrain that this goes through. Angela, do you want to set this one up?
Well, I know very well the area. I've been to Tibet quite a few times, and so basically it's how you link two difficult areas, which is Sichuan area and Yunnan area, into Tibet. So back 25 years ago, the only way to get there was to go by bus. But even by bus, there were landslides. So you can imagine the terrain is one of the most difficult terrains in the world. And they're managing to link Sichuan and Yunnan into Tibet. And it's going to be just an amazing exploit, like miracles in terms of engineering. And I think the contribution for Tibet economy is going to be huge. Just amazing how you can make the almost impossible reality. It's just a great vision. And again, it's because of planification, and because of looking at long-term benefits. Again, whatever you are putting into infrastructure, you're not going to have the payback right away. It's about looking at what is going to bring in 10, 20 years time. And there's a multiple effects, into the economy. Once you invest into infrastructure, you bring so much, it's not only the investment into let's say 1 billion infrastructure project. There's everything that goes around that. You are going, the land is going to increase, people are going to move in, new industries. It's just, so there's what we call the multiplicator effect, and it's very, very big. It's very big.
As I remember, as I was researching the high-speed rail network, there were all these old articles from across the Western media saying how bad of an idea this was to build this high-speed rail network. And they're using the exact same arguments to encourage Thailand and Laos to abandon their high-speed rail network that they're building in partnership with China. And they were saying, it's a poor country and they don't have the money to afford the ticket. Nobody's going to ride it. It's a boondoggle. It's just for political status. And it's as if they have no idea, just as you said, the infrastructure, the first year you run it, it's not going to have a lot of riders. The second, third, fourth year, maybe no riders. Now, China's high-speed rail moves something like 10 billion passengers a year, something like it's a huge number. People are definitely using it. I remember before the high-speed rail network was finished, I went from Shanghai to Kunming, and it took like 2 or 3 days. It's a long train ride. And they've cut that down to just under a day, like 10 hours, something like that. And the trains get faster and faster. And just like you said, what this does is if you have a business and you were only able to reach people in this area because of time constraints and your ability to travel further, now you can do that. And that's what happens. That's what happened here in Bangkok when they were building the transit system, the elevated train and the subway. Entire areas of the city that were kind of run down, suddenly they started building up. And all these people in that area, ordinary people, not big business people, were able to have thriving businesses because they were able to connect with so many more people now. So there was that. Here's the next article, which is related. China unveils 600 kilometer per hour maglev train. And then they say state media, like maybe it's not true because it's state media said it. This is Reuters, insufferable. People might not know this, but China already has the fastest train in the world. It's a maglev. It operates on the outskirts of Shanghai. It connects Pudong Airport to the outskirts of Shanghai, where you get on the metro and you could go anywhere in the city. Angelo, have you traveled on the maglev? Did you ever get a chance to do that?
This is the most impressive experience, really, especially when you fly into Shanghai. The first experience is you take the train from Shanghai to Pudong area, which is a new area in Shanghai, and the train goes at more than 400 kilometers per hour. So it's very impressive. And this is the first impression you have from China, if you fly into Shanghai, one of the most modern airports in the world. Then you have the fastest train in the world, and then you go into the fastest, the most modern place in the world, because Pudong area is just, it was farmland 30 years ago. Now it's high-rise buildings. So it's extremely impressive. And this is what I call the 24 hours, first 24 hours in China that changes completely your perspective on China. When it comes to maglev, it's very interesting. Think about it. This is a technology that comes from the West. The West didn't believe in its own technology. The politicians didn't want to go into that, just because of lobbying. If imagine in the US, if you didn't have the lobby of oil and cars, these ideas could go through. So the West didn't believe in this technology, while the Chinese, they saw that this was a huge opportunity for China. And it's a clean energy. When you talk about train, it's a clean energy, and it's much more efficient. So what they did, the maglev had a certain limit, and China made had a contribution just to improve the performance of the maglev. So it's going at 600 kilometers per hour. So in many cases, it doesn't make any sense to take the planes. Shanghai, Beijing can be done in 2.5 hours. So Chinese had the vision, and it's showing the world how it can be done. So it's just, I think it's a pity. If you were to look at the distances, the US distances, Shanghai, Beijing, 2.5 hours, imagine the same distance in the US. You could link the whole US with the maglev train. While now, look at the infrastructure in the US. The US doesn't need to invest into infrastructure. It's not about investing into new infrastructure in the US. It's about how you can maintain. They need trillions just to renew what they have. I'm not even talking about building up new infrastructure, because it's crumbling, it's falling to pieces. So I think it's an embarrassment. The maglev, it's a good example on how the West didn't believe in its potential, and China, has a vision there.
And it's interesting because I was researching maglevs. I thought that this unveiling was incredible, and actually the plan that they have with this new maglev is the Shanghai maglev, and there's actually a couple of other maglevs in operation in China. They're usually operating within any particular city. So this new maglev is going to actually start connecting Chinese cities together instead of just going from one point to another inside the city. The Shanghai maglev, I think that travels about 30 kilometers in distance. So these would be much longer routes, much faster than the high-speed rail already goes. And China already has the fastest trains in the world, and then Japan, and this is the fastest maglev, and now they have beaten their own record. I don't think this one has actually run, but it's designed to go 600 kilometers per hour, and there's no reason to expect that it won't. What's interesting is here in Thailand, just like I said, the West is trying to block the high-speed rail project with China. They already have this new station, Bangsil Grand Station, which will host the high-speed trains. And these trains will go from Bangkok to Vientiane, Laos, and then to Kunming, and then to the rest of China's high-speed rail network. We had this US-backed politician, Thanaton. He's this billionaire. Before he got into politics and championing for the common man, he was a union buster in his family's factory. He's not a self-made billionaire. His mom and dad handed him his fortune. His mom actually still runs the business. He went to the United States to go look at Hyperloop, which, okay, Hyperloop is not a bad idea, but it's an idea on paper. They have some mock-ups, and they have a 500-meter-long test track in the Nevada desert, and this is what Thanaton went to go see. And they haven't moved any real passengers anywhere, and they won't for many years to come. And he's saying, let's cancel the Chinese high-speed rail project, and let's invest in Hyperloop. It's just the dumbest thing I ever heard. And this just goes to show you what the US has to offer the world. They will block real projects. This is a project being done with proven technology. I said Chinese high-speed rail moves billions of passengers a year. And Hyperloop hasn't moved anyone at all except on a test track. And he's saying, cancel high-speed rail with China, and let's do this. By the time this ever goes online, if it ever goes online, what are we talking about, like 50 years from now or something? It just boggles the mind, but this is what the US does everywhere. Right before we started doing this, we were talking about dams, which is another project that actually we're gonna talk about. You were talking about dams and how they use these ridiculous environmental and human rights excuses to block dam construction in the developing world. And we were talking about how electricity for rural regions that don't have it is so important to drive development, and they will block it with equally dumb ideas or dumb pretexts. Let me see if I can find. This is the mega dam.
There are good examples, especially in Africa. I mean, imagine just if Africa was all electrified, just that. I'm not even talking about roads, but electrified. You would just put the foundation. So you have those green NGOs that are going to Africa and telling them, oh, well, you know what? We need to preserve the nature you have here. So you need to live the same as you used to live like 100 years ago. We don't want you to develop, nomads, it's cool because, we are going to come, us, rich foreigners into Africa with our cameras, and we want you to live like the same as the Maasai used to live. It's the same as actually in Tibet. They wanted Tibetans to still live like nomads. And I've seen that. 25 years ago when I was in Tibet, they were so poor. And many people in Tibet didn't have a house. They were living in tents. And they were just nomads traveling according to the season. So when it was getting cold, they would go down, when it was, warmer, they would go up, and it was with the cattle, with yaks. So it's just ridiculous. It's so arrogant. While I was asking Tibetans, what do you want from your life and so on? Of course, they want to keep their traditions, but what they want is just basic stuff. It's a house and education for their kids. That's what they want. So you have arrogant Westerners that are actually trying to impose on them to stay poor and uneducated. How arrogant.
And I've traveled to Vientiane, the capital of Laos, many times. I really like it. It's nice, and if you can speak Thai, you can communicate with people in Laos also. And I remember many years ago when I was first there in the capital, they had like dirt roads. There were roads that weren't even paved yet, and there were these banners in the streets hung up by Western NGOs and the UN telling people, make sure you turn your lights off, don't use a lot of electricity. And this was what their vision for Laos was, to just freeze it in time and leave it like that. And when you look at what is the Western footprint in Laos, it's all these fake NGOs running around in their SUVs in Vientiane. Now, what was China doing at that time? They were building highways from north to south so that people from Thailand and people from China could travel all the way through Laos and everywhere in between. That's when you started seeing roads getting paved, proper, buildings being built, and development, and the city starting to look like a modern city. So this is the choice that the world has. They can rise with China, or they could accept the West, who's going to freeze you in time because they want to maintain primacy. And they know, you've said this many times, Angelo, 4% of the world trying to dominate 96% of the world, right? It's impossible. The only way you could do that is if you prevent everyone else from developing and keep them primitive so that you could lord over them with your industry and your well-funded military. It's sad, but at the same time, we see countries moving past that. Laos is a good example. Their high-speed rail is actually going to start running at the end of this year or early next year. So they will have high-speed rail in Laos before the US has high-speed rail.
Amazing.
The next one, since we were talking about dams, a mega dam on the Great Bend of China. I think we mentioned this in a previous episode, but Angelo, you want to go into this one?
This is so big. Imagine the size of this dam is 2 times the Three Gorges Dam. So Three Gorges Dam is the largest dam project in the world. Potentially, it could actually supply the energy for the population of England. Imagine just a dam could provide clean electricity for the population of England. It's just amazing. So it just gives you and this is linked to the project of China to reach in 2060 zero carbon emission. So China is leading the way when it comes to sustainable energy. Also, one thing which is really important is that we're talking about very often about the next war. We used to have the war on oil. The next war might be oil, the war on water. We see that in Ethiopia, there's a huge dam project, and there's a potential risk of war between Ethiopia and Egypt, and I think Somalia as well. In China here, you have Tibet has a huge resources in oil. It's extremely big. You have Brahmaputra that starts from there, and actually, if you build a dam upstream, well, it could affect potentially India and even Myanmar. So this is something that actually has a potential for war and needs to be dealt really carefully between China and India. And so this might be one of the reasons that they have conflicts between China and India, and why India has been pushing so much for Tibetan independence. It might be related to the resources of Tibet, and one of the biggest resources is water. They're just afraid that water might be diverted into other areas in China, because China, there's a problem of desertification in China, and they're trying to divert oil from Tibet into central China. But I think
water. Yes.
Yeah, water. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. I mean, water and oil. These are things that people are fighting over right now, or using as a pretext. And we see this all the time. Every time a dam comes up, you're always going to see some guy with some traditional fishing net fishing in the river, and they're saying, well, how's this guy going to keep fishing like this if you build a dam? First of all, there are ways of building dams where fish can bypass the dam. They have like steps for the fish to migrate up and down the river. They have that. They can do that. Number two, these people fishing like this, oftentimes they are fishing things to extinction because this is not sustainable anymore. They need to find a modern economic activity to engage in, but they can't because infrastructure hasn't reached to where they're at. So that's why they're still doing this. So the notion that we need to freeze these rural, isolated villages in time and not build dams because we might affect their traditional way of doing things, this would be the same thing that they would complain about because they're fishing the species in the river to extinction. I mean, a lot of the species going extinct is because of this. Yes, because of dams can be a contributing factor, but also this. So it's just it's an excuse. It's an excuse to poison the public against the idea of building a dam. I've seen these fake Western-funded NGOs doing the exact same thing here in Thailand to block dams.
Yeah, you mentioned the fishermen just before. I saw something about the Gwadar port in Pakistan, and actually it was a documentary, and they were saying, "Oh, you see those few fishermen? They won't have any job later," and they don't see. Actually, we are talking about huge port, tens of thousands of jobs. And sometimes it's funny how Western media, they focused on individuals, while in reality, I think it's in Asia, it's very different. You look at society as a whole, and it's not about the individuals, and individuals have to be sometimes to make sacrifice for the rest of the society. A country is extremely different, like in the individualist society in the West, where it's all about the individual, while in Asia, we look at society, the greater good of society. Very different cultures.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because I think it's called eminent domain laws in the US, where they do seize private property for public projects. And they have these the pipelines going through the US, and I think they were passing through Native American reservation lands. And it's like you already slaughtered them to near extinction. You put them on these tiny reservations, and then on top of all of that, you're going to run pipelines through their land, or whatever the story was with that, the West does the exact same thing, and then you watch how the media has a completely different tune to sing when it comes to that. And then when they're trying to block development in Asia to keep the region subordinated to Western nations, then they say something else. Well, people have to be very careful about that. It isn't that there aren't issues when building a dam. There are, and it should be scrutinized. But that's for the people in that region to do. It's not for Westerners and fake NGOs to butt in. And they're always, not even sometimes, always doing it with an ulterior motive to block development. And just as you were saying, Angelo, this is the Jamestown Foundation, which I'm pretty sure if we look at the funding, that will be like Raytheon or something funding them. But Beijing boosts its position as Himalayan hegemon through hydropower. Did you read through this, Angelo?
Yes, I read through that, and they're talking about the threats that it could cause to India. It's saying that basically India is actually planning itself downstream to build some dams. So you see, it's not only China building dams, but that could be a conflict. I think it's just when you have many dams, it's about building good communications between each countries, just to make sure that there's enough, especially when it comes to agriculture. Basic access to water. So I think it's just about, and Chinese are no fool. You cannot, they will never do anything that would affect India. It's just avoiding any conflict. But if this dam can bring access to electricity to millions of people, China will do it. I have some figures actually. This dam would bring, in terms of revenues, around $3 billion per year to Tibet. Can you imagine? $3 billion to Tibet. That's huge.
Yes, and even if there was a way for China and India to work this out, we know that the United States is going to try to light a fire and then dump as much fuel on that fire as possible to get a conflict going between India and China. We've already seen this over territorial disputes. And this is just because the US is trying to use India as a giant cudgel against China, just like they're trying to do to every nation in Southeast Asia. This is part of the encirclement policy that we've talked about, and we've shown that the US government has pursued for decades as a matter of official policy. Let's go and take a look at, you had this one also, China's City of the Future. What about this one, Angelo?
So this is just massive. If only people knew what is going on. I mean, this project is probably one of the largest projects in the world when it comes to infrastructure. It's about building up a full city, extremely modern city from scratch. $400 billion project. It's about a huge vision to build the city of the future. It's not about this, this example of Saudi Arabia talking about a city, neon, and so on. It's just about.
I was just going to say that. This looks
nothing,
like
nothing will happen. Nothing will happen. It will be nowhere near what they will do in China. All the infrastructure around the city is already built. There's already a train going to Xiong'an, and then it's going to be the city of the future. Can you imagine? If it's a huge opportunity. It's like, this game SimCity, where you build your city and so on. Well, this is China, what China is doing. The problem in the West is that they build up the city, and then they might work around the infrastructure while it's too late. When you can build up first the infrastructure and then slowly, you have some planification before. So much, so efficient. So you see, $400 billion. And again, I think if you were to look at the proportion of how much China is investing to infrastructure, it's just massive. And I think it's giving you, there's a lag time between investment and the return on investment, meaning that they're investing into future growth. So you can add up 1 or 2% GDP just because of all the infrastructure that is being built in China right now. This is a very good example. This is This is a tweet by Carl Jai. He's an influencer. It's very interesting. I advise people to follow him. He's got some very interesting tweets there. This is so CNN was saying here that China is building metro station that is leading to nowhere. And it's this whole thing about fake propaganda. And then here you see a few years later, maybe I don't know, it's probably 1 year later, you already have buildings around. And this is in the city of Chongqing. There's also, I've seen some documentaries about what the Western medias are calling ghost cities. Of course, when you're building the cities, and those are massive projects in China. Sometimes you have projects where for 10,000, 20,000 people, and at first they are empty. But this is planification. But when you come back 1 year later and it's all full. It's all full. But they give you only the picture when it's empty. They don't come back 1 year later when it's all full and it's all bustling. And there's development. They don't want you to see that because planification works.
I remember when I first started traveling on the elevated train in Bangkok, where it was, I don't know how new it was, but it was relatively new. And when you were riding on it, you're like, how come there's hardly anyone on this train? It's so nice. It's new. It goes straight to the center of the city. Why? Because they just built it. And that's how it works. That's how it always works. You build the infrastructure and then the development follows. If you were to go on that same station that I used to get on and travel at any time in the morning or in the evening, it's packed. It's packed. There's no room at all on the. Sometimes you have to wait for the next train to come because you can literally not fit inside the train. So that's why now there's not enough train lines in Bangkok. So that's how it works. That's how infrastructure works. And China knows this. People don't realize that. You go look at a map at how many huge cities that China has. Some cities have populations larger than some countries have total populations. Like I think Shanghai is like 20-something million people. There's a lot of countries that have a smaller population than that. And they know what it's like when you're developing and how you're constantly playing catch up. They try to get ahead of the curve by doing things like this. And then obviously, yes, people are going to use it. They're not like CNN. I bet if CNN was on the train with me in Bangkok, they would be like, Thailand's building empty subway systems, empty sky trains. They would do that because they need to find anything negative about China that they can to smear the country, to deride their achievements, and also to make it look like we don't want that here in the West. When in actuality, if you're a Westerner and you go and you see how nice the infrastructure is in China, you're wondering, why can't we have this? You start asking questions. Why can't we have this in the US? Why can't we have this in Europe? Why not? What's going on? Something's wrong with this picture. Was there another story you wanted to go over? I want to talk about Xiaomi, but since we're talking about infrastructure.
Well, just to you, I saw one of your videos when you were mentioning like some vloggers in China that are actually just filming the streets in China. And I think that is very interesting. You actually don't need to comment that. If you see those videos of people walking around the street in China without any comments, no addition, nothing, no additions whatsoever.
And no editing. No editing.
Mind-blowing. It's lively, and it makes it so much more human than those edited videos when they're putting like a crazy sound, a scary sound, and they make it look dark, this BBC editing.
Yeah, and it's funny how the BBC's cameras all go from 4K when they're filming something in the West, and suddenly they're like 180p when they reach China. I don't know what happens. Maybe the Chinese Communist government gives them the dinge cam filters. I don't know.
It's like, whenever they're filming China, they make it look like a Auschwitz Holocaust camp,
Yeah, it's everything, every street corner. Yeah.
It's like, it's like, no, what China is 1.4 billion people living in a Holocaust, in a Auschwitz camp. That's what it makes it look, and it's very easy. Again, how you can manipulate a movies or documentary is very easy. You just choose.
Yes.
You take everything out of context. You darken the image. You put some scary music, and that's it. People are misled emotionally. People, nowadays it's about quick information. People don't dig, and they don't have time. They don't have time. We are with the other people that have the experience of Asia and China. We are taking our time just to explain, and so
I highly recommend people go check out those 4K walks, because again, they'll go like 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, longer than an hour with a 4K camera, and they're just walking around. They don't edit or anything, so you're watching them walk from one area to the other. They're not commenting on it. They're not telling you what you're looking at is good or bad. You just look at it for yourself and see. And some of them, okay, they're in some of the nicer parts of the main cities, but some of these channels have just like residential areas where you can just see how everything is. And I remember when I was in China, I went from Shanghai to Kunming by train. I saw everything passing by the window. I saw nice areas. I saw very rural areas. And you could see the development. You could see it with your own eyes. And when I got to Kunming, the whole city is very modern. It's very nice. Even back then, that was many years ago. It was a nice, modern city. And I walked around. I felt safe everywhere I went. And that was Kunming. It's not even like one of the, it's not like a mega city like Shanghai. So I suggest people go and do that. This actually is not really, it's kind of infrastructure. Telecommunications is infrastructure. And Xiaomi and Huawei, these should be companies people are familiar with. This is Xiaomi surpassing Apple in smartphone sales. And they're just behind Samsung. This is from CNN. This isn't Chinese state media. They're saying Apple only has 14%. Xiaomi is at 17%, and Samsung is 19%. And this is after the US tried to put Xiaomi on their sanction list or their blacklist or whatever they had them on. Actually, they were on it, and then they got themselves off of it. The US tried to say that they're connected to the Chinese military, and then so what? So what is America's problem with that, if it was true? But it wasn't true, and they challenged it in court, and they were taken off the list. But whether they were on the list or not, they still surpassed Apple. And this is how the US competes. They do not compete head-on in a fair way. They sneak around, and they do these underhanded schemes, and they're still losing. So they're proving they cannot compete on an even playing field, and even when they're cheating, they're still losing. So what does this tell you, Angelo?
Well, it's very interesting. Well, you see, I look at the microchips industry here. TSMC, which is the Taiwanese microchips leader in the world, is getting pressure not to deliver high-end microchips to China. So what is happening is that you have on the other side the US, which is investing to its own microchips industry, and then you have China massively investing to its own microchip industry. Who's the loser? TSMC, because now they have two new competitors, and China is going to buy Chinese, and Americans are going to buy American. So you see how people that are following the orders of the US empire, they are going to end up losing. There's another example. I give you the coal. When it comes to coal import by China, you know about the tensions between Australia and China. So US put pressure on Australia to go against China. So what did China? It stopped buying coal from Australia. Where is China buying coal now? From US. How can I call? What do you call people? Countries like Australia? I mean, it's not the country. It's the government, Australian government, useful idiots, because you are taking orders from the US. China is not going to buy from you, but they are going to buy. China is going to buy from the US. How ridiculous is that? How ridiculous is that?
They're sabotaging their own partners. They're filling the gap, and then ultimately, I'm glad you brought up the microchip situation, because that was one of the ways the U.S. was hurting Huawei. was by denying them components manufactured in the US. What's going to happen is that these Chinese companies are going to get around that one way or the other. Like you said, they're investing in manufacturing chips in China. And then what do you think is going to happen? The same exact thing that happened with smartphones. They're going to start making their own. They're going to start putting them out onto the international markets, and they're going to end up squeezing out and outcompeting US chip manufacturers. So what the US government is doing in this spiteful, pointless bid to stop a much larger country from having a larger economy than the US, it's very childish, by the way. But what they're doing is they're denying their own companies in the United States the ability to rise with China. They could be rising with China and they doing business with China and sharing, competing constructively and collaborating and everyone rising together, but they're not doing that. They're doing this spiteful campaign to try to inhibit China. It's failing and they're hurting US companies in the process. And then what is going to end up happening is the more conflict that they create with China, the longer it's going to take to reconcile. Once the conflict is over, the US has lost, and now they have to come back to the table with no leverage. This is what they're doing to themselves. I just hope that people in America and businesses in America realize how pointless this is and start thinking of what they can do to transform Washington and Wall Street to rectify this, because it's not for anybody's benefit at all in the long run.
Yeah, well, I'm going to throw in some Chinese wisdoms here. Chinese, they say, 以退为进. How you can turn a setback into an opportunity. And we saw it in many ways. Microchip is one of the example. But another example is the space station example. They ostracized China and they didn't want China to join the space station. Well, you know what it did, China? It's building its own space station. So, and it's going actually further. So the thing is that every time you're giving sanctions to China, China is going to come back and even stronger and say, well, you know what? We are going to be more self-sufficient and we are going to go one step ahead. Keeping in mind that there's so many more engineers in China when it comes to STEM, like science, technology, mathematics. They can do much more innovation than we can, just because they have much more resources in terms of human capital, and they have funds, and they have ambitions. They have a vision. They are not constrained by quick return on investment. They don't have this constraint, and which is one of the biggest problems we have. It's most Western companies are looking in terms of quarterly profits. In China, they are thinking about the next 10 years, the next generation, and the next century. Imagine if the world was thinking the same as China is thinking, in terms of how are we going to build up a better world for the next generation, and not in terms of electoral cycles. We are thinking in terms of electoral cycles. Now there's Biden, but we're already talking about the next elections. And the next elections, if it's a Trump that is back, is going to destroy what Biden did. And it's about competition. It's going to be about a competition on how anti-China, anti-Russia you are. What is it bringing to humanity? Nothing. This is just destroying. It's destroying everything.
What I think is interesting, you just touched on it. In China, the free market is like a force of nature. And what China does with its plans and its central government is they kind of harness the free market as a force of nature, just like you would with a river and building a dam. And in the US and in the West in general, they just let it run wild. And when you just let it run wild, it does unpredictable things. It could cause catastrophe. It could cause flooding. It could do all kinds of things. And the course of the river can just change season to season. And you see this in the West. This is why they don't have a high-speed rail network in the United States, because nobody's willing to invest in something that might not on its own be profitable. From China's perspective, they know that when they build the high-speed rail network, it on its own might not be that profitable, but it's going to, in the whole picture, it's going to make everything else much more prosperous. They're able to look at that whole picture and make decisions based on what would be best for that whole picture, not what would be best for just this particular project. And that is something that you need to do when you're running a country. You can't have everybody going in different directions. Everyone has to cooperate. That's the whole point of having a country in the first place. That's what I thought was some sort of common purpose. You know, it doesn't have to be too regimented. And when people go to China, they'll see that it really isn't that regimented, but they do have a common sense approach to planning and building up their country. It's obviously working. We are at 1 hour, Angelo. We're close to the end here. Is there anything else you want to add on to this?
No, always enjoying. We could talk for hours. Always a pleasure to talk to you. And I think it's important. What we are doing here, we've said it before, it's just to bring some more information to people. You know, this is an alternative to mainstream media, which is aiming for Cold War. And I think it's very important for us that we are living in Asia. We have first-hand experience of the region, that by providing those informations, we can somehow, maybe indirectly prevent war, and at least bringing some more information to people and have an alternative. Just beware. Try to get different sources. And yes. The best thing, if you want to learn about China and the region, just go to China. We don't need to tell you. We don't need to tell you everything what we said just before. The single fact that you go to China, then you've done it all. We won't need to tell you anything. Just go to China and see with your own eyes. Are those people happy? Are those people positive? About the future? Just look for your own eyes. With your own eyes. Yeah.
Yes, because by the time I finally did have the chance to go to China, I already wasn't buying the propaganda from the West, because I already saw, everything I was told about Japan or Thailand, I already saw with my own eyes was a complete lie. But I was still shocked when I went to China, because you still hear, oh, it's a communist country, it's repressive. And when you go there, you see that it's not. In many ways, it's more laid back than in the United States. People own things, they run their businesses, and when you walk around, you wouldn't even know that it was a communist country if you didn't see the red flag with the yellow stars. And China will say themselves that they've reformed their system many times over the years, and it's not the China of 100 years ago, it's not the China of Mao Zedong, it is the China of today. People, like you just said, Angelo, they need to go there and see it for themselves. And if you cannot travel, check out those 4K watts. It's not the best way to do it, but it's a good way to kind of see something a little bit different than what the Western media is presenting you. Full color, no dinge cam. They use regular cameras, and you can see what China looks like and how the people just walk around in their daily business. Tell me where the guy with the rifle is coercing them this way or that. You won't see it. So thank you again, Angelo, for your expertise. It's always appreciated. I'm going to put all the links for everything that we've talked about in the video description below. I'm also going to put links to Angelo's social media accounts so that you could go and follow him on social media. Please check out the AP article and look at how grubby they are and what they did there. That is contradicting their own reporting. Please check that out. And I'm going to have a video coming out on that, going in great depth. So thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Bye for now.
Bye.